Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nat.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming. I was looking at the program and I told Emily, you know, if I had to choose where to go, I would probably either go to the Scaling Wind film series or to our Changing Airshed. But thank you for coming. Can we go around the room really quickly and give me an idea of who's here? If you just give your name and sort of what you do real quick.
I'm Brenda Bowen. I'm a geology professor at the University of Utah and Associate Director of the Global Change and Sustainability Center.
Ariel Clark-Profit. I'm the Outreach and Education Coordinator for the Sustainability Resource Center at the U.
Rachel Sanders. I run the Green Grant Fund, or Sustainable Campus Initiative Fund at the University of Utah.
Kate Stevens, Center for Civic Engagement and Service Learning at USU, and I'm over student sustainability and service learning.
Jessica Berryman, biology instructor, teaching environmental science at Salt Lake Community College.
Rich Kendall, I'm on the Walker Institute board.
Kim Bartels, I'm from EPA Region 8 in Denver. I work on sustainable materials management, but I also work on STEM in our local school districts.
I'm Sean with Utah State University Center for Civic Engagement and Service Learning.
Carrie Case, I oversee sustainability for Westminster College in Salt Lake.
I'm Elisa Starkman, Department of Workforce Services, and I administer grants to higher ed institutions, public institutions for Utah Cluster Acceleration Partnership, and we're also developing a K-12 STEM grant this year.
I'm Angie McCourt. I work here at Weber State Housing Office. I look at the operational aspect of our firm.
And I'm Carla Trondleman. I'm an environmental sociologist here at Weber State teaching sociology.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm actually so glad that it's a smaller group. I'm recovering from a really nasty, several weeks long upper respiratory infection, so my voice might give out. But I'd like for this to be more of a conversation towards the end. One of the things that I just got off of a year working with the Association of American Colleges and Universities on a number of their programs. And my talk today is really to sort of encourage you at what you're doing and to give you a picture nationally of what's going on so that you don't feel so alone. I think a lot of times, particularly for those of us who are classroom teachers, we're trying to do things, we're trying to make connections, we're trying to tie things together, and we sometimes wonder, am I the only one out there doing that? And so I wanted to reassure you that there are a number of things going on nationally, and I'll actually only touch on a few of those here, but we can explore more of those if we want to. Now, why is it not doing this? Okay, so one of the things I spent a lot of time doing during my sabbatical was reading, and this is a very interesting book. I'm a little bit of a rabble-rouser, and so I really liked it when Dickinson said this: higher education has produced some spectacular examples of institutional cowardice in the fulfillment of necessary but popular reform. And I think anyone who's involved with higher education today knows that we are in a time of reform. Things are happening out there, and we need to catch up. And so I want to just briefly go over some of the things that are happening nationally. If you're familiar with this report, which came out from the National Academy of Sciences, the National Academy of Engineering, and the Institute of Medicine, called Rising Above the Gathering Storm, this has really focused the nation on STEM education. It really pointed out how we're just not up to speed in comparison with Northern Europe and even Southern Europe and even Eastern Europe in terms of educating students about STEM. And it's not just scientists, technicians, engineers, and mathematicians. We're not educating our humanists and our artists and our real estate agents about STEM education. And so this is really the document that called attention that we have to do something. But if you've read this document, it's more than that. It also talks about how not only have we got to catch up in STEM education, but our whole educational system has to change. And those of us in universities, it's often occurred to me aren't we supposed to be showing people how to do it in the 21st century? We're training the people, as Secretary Jewell said, who are going to go out there and operate the planet. And so, are we teaching them in the same old way that we were taught, or are we adopting the very best from educational research in the way that we teach? And so, Rising Above the Gathering Storm didn't just say we got to do better at STEM education. It said we've got to apply new knowledge about the nature of teaching and learning. We've got to design new learning environments. And we've got to provide an environment conducive to the transformation of research results into practical applications. So as a classroom teacher who's been teaching since dirt was invented, I have to change the way I'm doing things. There was a wonderful study that came out, and you can download this from the Chronicle of Education website for $90, or you can actually read it online for free. But it talked about the student who's coming along that we're going to be faced with in our classrooms in 2020. And we're increasingly finding that students want to design their own curricula and find ways to learn in their own styles. And the colleges that attempt to cram their style down students' throats are quickly going to find themselves uncompetitive. So one of the things that I've done in my own classes is offer students a choice of how they're going to be graded. They can do group activities, individual activities, writing activities, service learning projects, and it's a real bookkeeping headache for me to keep track of 90 students doing these different things, but it allows a student to find the way that they learn best. And after all, isn't that what I'm hoping for? Is that they'll learn something, not that they'll just march in lockstep to whatever I want them to do. So they can take individual tests, they can take group tests. Yes?
Can I ask a question about that? So do they decide at the beginning of the class?
Yes.
So they have to come in and choose and then stick
That's
with
right.
that?
They usually have 1,200 to 1,600 points that are available, and they choose the, some are required of everybody, but about half they get to choose what they're going to do for the 1,000 points. Some of them come in and say, can I do everything and then pick the best? And I say no. Pick the 1,000 you want to do and we'll work on it that way. So there are a lot of visions out there for improved student learning. This is one of my favorite, and it's not what you're thinking of. So I had the opportunity to hear Jose talk, and he talked about, when he says moving technology out of your classroom, he means using technology to move content out of the classroom. Let the students learn the content on their own time. And then you can use in-class time for more in-depth teaching and interaction. And I'm able to get 90 students in a classroom to interact. And this is an awful classroom. It's set up as an auditorium, and the seats really aren't that movable. You can turn them around, so I can get students working in groups, but it's possible, you can do it. We access iTunes U, Merlot, the Khan Academy, YouTube, etc. There are better lecturers out there than I am, and I hate standing up here talking to you. I was once attending a conference that lasted 3 days, and for 3 days, the conference leader stood up there and lectured to us about how lecturing is not an effective way of teaching. So we were all sitting there elbowing each other in the ribs. But there are lectures and videos out there on everything from DNA synthesis to biodiversity that are given by people who are better lecturers than me. They're cuter than I am. They capture the students' attention more than I do. And the animations that go along with DNA synthesis and things like this, there are some fantastic artists who are imagining what's going on at the molecular level. Much better than I could ever draw on a drawing board. So I can show some of those in class, I can push them out and have the students do them on their own. And then we can talk about it. So the whole idea of the sage on the stage is pretty much obsolete. Now, I won't say that I don't lecture in my classes, but I tell the students, if I assign a reading or a video, I'm not going to talk about that in class. I'm going to amplify it in class. And it's so tempting. It's so tempting when you go into class and it's obvious that they haven't read to say, well, I better fall back and lecture them on it. Don't do it. And eventually they catch on and they'll come around. And so the sage on the stage has to give way to things like what Donald Finkel talked about. Beautiful book called Teaching with Your Mouth Shut. And if you haven't read this book and you are a teacher, I really encourage you to read it. So the other thing is that places like the Lumina Foundation are working on what they call the degree qualifications profile. Now, here we're just looking at college, but what the Lumina Foundation has done is that they've looked at associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, and master's degrees in 5 dimensions: applied learning, intellectual skills, specialized knowledge, broad, and civic learning. And they don't suggest that your curriculum at your school or university or college should look like this. It may bulge out in the civic learning part. It may bulge out into the specialized knowledge part. It may bulge out into applied learning and intellectual skills. But to be aware that whatever you're doing and however you design your curriculum school-wide, that you're paying attention to things like what is applied learning and what are intellectual skills and how are we incorporating those in a graded way as we take students who enter college through the first 2 years, the second 2 years, and then hopefully on maybe for another year and a half. Specialized knowledge is obviously a part. It's going to be much bigger in some degree programs than in others. And so again, this is not a balanced thing. You can bulge it any way you want to, but the Lumina Foundation research shows that you need to be aware of all of these. And you need to be consciously working with colleagues about what are they doing and what are you doing and how are we covering this in our degree programs. 2 years ago in January, there was a White House conference, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but one of the things that came out of that conference was a document called A Crucible Moment. You can download this for free from the internet. Just go to the AACNU website or just Google A Crucible Moment. Basically what this document says is that we have concentrated so much in the United States recently on educating people for employment that we have forgotten to educate people to be active participants, civically engaged in a democratic society. And we need to get back to that. Not giving up on the employment, but we need to incorporate back. And this comes from, I think, the 3rd paragraph on page 10. It's my favorite quote from the document, and it sends chills down my spine every time I read it. So I'll just let you read that yourselves. Education in a restrictive, undemocratic country needs only to cultivate obedient and productive workers. I don't think that's what we want in this country. And so we in the college community especially have to accept that, and I would say irrespective of the subject matter you teach, we need to incorporate ideas of civic engagement and the social importance of our subject matter to what's going on. And it's important that we have real estate agents, lawyers, doctors, Indian chiefs, candle makers, buggy whip makers that understand this. So the actual conference at the White House was called For Democracy's Future, 5 Essential, the National Task Force on Civic Learning and Democratic Engagement. And they came up with these things that we must do in higher education. Civic and democratic mission of higher education, we've got to revitalize that. This one, I think, is worded a little strange. What they meant was the current narrative erases civic claims and civic literacy as educational priorities. We have to enlarge that and reincorporate civic aims and civic literacy. We've got to advance this framework for civic learning that includes the historic and modern understandings, the capacities to engage diverse perspectives and people, and the commitment to collective civic problem solving. We got to capitalize, this is very important, capitalize upon the independent responsibilities of K through 12 and higher education. And I think that's one of the poorest things that we do in this country. K through 12 is almost totally disconnected from higher education. And higher education is certainly almost totally disconnected from K through 12. And that's one of the themes that I'll expand upon a little later on. And then the civic partnerships are certainly important as well. So, we know that students who participate in civic learning opportunities are more likely to persist in college and complete their degrees. And I think this is particularly important when we're talking about people who are the first in their family ever to go to college. We've got to engage them in understanding that college means something other than sitting in a classroom and having somebody pour knowledge into your head. And we also know that they have skills that are prized by employers and that they develop habits of social responsibility and civic participation that persist once they leave college. So, one of the things that the Association of American Colleges and Universities has engaged in is the LEAP program, Liberal Education and America's Promise. And they're basically calling for a return to the idea of liberal education in our higher education institutions. Utah is a LEAP state. How many of you were aware of that? Okay, good. We are a LEAP state. Presently, Utah is engaged in history and physics in the LEAP program. But one of the neat things about LEAP is that guess what one of the overriding topics is that we can spread across the curriculum to tie together the arts, the humanities, the social sciences, the biological sciences, and the physical sciences. Can anybody say sustainability? So we have a responsibility to help our universities do that, those of us who are engaged in sustainable education. What other topic would better pull all this together? So why LEAP? This is sort of nebulous. I think more importantly, AAC&U did a survey of employers, and this is what they found. 95% put a priority on hiring people with the intellectual, interpersonal skills that help them contribute to innovation in the workplace. I've read studies that are saying that in the manufacturing sector, it's not the people in the corporate office, it's not the engineers who are coming up with better ways of manufacturing things. It's the people on the assembly line who are saying, I sit here every day doing this, you know what? There's a better way. And so big corporations are now recognizing that it's the people on the floor that will come across with the innovations that put us ahead in manufacturing and product development, because they're looking at it every day. The engineers, the people in the corporate office, their heads are in the clouds. They're dealing with theory and stockholders and, you know, what kind of better materials can we use? And the people on the floor are innovating how we can manufacture things more effectively and more efficiently. 93% want candidates that demonstrate the capacity to think critically, communicate clearly, and solve complex problems. And it's more important than what their major was. And again, what better topic than sustainability to tie together every major across a university or a college. 91% of employers say the challenges their employees face are more complex today than they were in the past. If I just teach students ecology as I learned it, or environmental science as I learned it, or history as I learned it, they're not prepared. They're going to face complex problems that I never encountered in any of my several careers that I've been through. So, some essential learning outcomes for LEAP, and again, Utah is a LEAP state. Knowledge of human cultures in the physical and natural world, sustainability. Intellectual and practical skills, sustainability. Personal and social responsibility, sustainability. Integrative and applied learning, sustainability, sustainability, sustainability. By the way, I was asked earlier last year, to write an article because are you aware that the MCAT, the Medical College Admissions Tests, are being redesigned? They're being redesigned to have a, look at number 3, psychological, social, and biological foundations of human behavior. That section in the new MCAT exam will be as big as and have as many questions as and take as long as the biological and biochemical foundations of living system, the biology part of the exam, and the chemistry and physics part of the exam. This is a new part of the MCAT test, where the medical community has finally realized, gee, how do I know that my patient is going to follow their treatment plan? I have to understand what motivates them. How do I know that my patients are going to come to me at the appropriate time when they have disease? I need to understand the biological and psychosocial aspects of human behavior. And so I was asked to write an article specifically about number 3 and what I thought about it. So the first thing I did was I went and found a psychologist to be my co-author. And basically we said this, absolutely, positively, yes. Physicians need to know this. Now, here's your challenge. Find a profession where the practitioners of that profession would not benefit from knowing about the psychosocial basis of human behavior. I can't find one. And so the medical community is gearing up to say, this is an important part of pre-medical education. Why are we not gearing up across the universities to say, if I don't know what motivates human behavior, then I don't know when I'm being manipulated. And equally important, I don't know how to manipulate other people. And so, to me, and I taught at a medical school for several years, finally the medical community is out in front of us. They've got to understand the psychosocial basis of human behavior. Don't we all? Don't all of our students need to know that? A real estate agent, a used car salesman, a minister, a doctor, a lawyer, an Indian chief, a candle maker, an artist, a musician, a film director. The next generation science standards are something you've all heard of, I hope. Anybody not heard of next generation science standards? This is wonderful stuff, folks. I just want to take you just for a moment to their website, if I can find it here. Where is my, oops. Well, I don't see my arrow. Basically what I was going to show you is the next generation science standards, which by the way is not a federal project. It is a state project and a private enterprise project. State educators have worked with private enterprise to determine what are the science standards that we need to have, and they've gone from K through 12. At each grade level, in physics science, life sciences, and social sciences, they've determined what is it that we want students to be able to do. It is not a curriculum. It is a skill set. They are not dictating what anybody's curriculum is. And what I was going to show you was a wonderful part of their webpage where you can scroll down to any grade level and any topic and click on it, and it will tell you this is what students should be able to do in this topic at this grade. Doesn't tell you how to do it. It's linked to the Common Core. It's linked to the National Academy of Sciences curriculum suggestions, and it's nationwide. So don't let anybody tell you that this is a federal program. It is not. It's by states, for states. So here's the problem that I see in terms of linking K through 12 with the college community. 65% of participants in a study of chemists and physicists reported that their interest in science began before middle school. That's before the 6th grade. And the findings of the study indicated that current policy efforts focusing on high school science to increase the number of students studying the science field may be misguided. Go back to Rising Above the Gathering Storm, where we said we need to increase the number of STEM graduates in this country. And all that was aimed at colleges and universities. Too late. We may increase the quality of the graduates, but colleges are too late to increase the number of scientists, technicians, engineers, and mathematicians, because they've made that decision before they hit the 6th grade. And as this research showed, high school is too late. And so if those of us in universities are interested in increasing the number of scientists or increasing the level of scientific understanding of the basic US citizen, irrespective of their career, we can't do that without talking to K through 5 teachers. And there's a problem. Other research has shown that preparing elementary teachers to teach science is complicated. They tend to be generalists. Most of them haven't had much science. They're uncomfortable teaching science. They're not familiar with science. And you know what? If you're teaching science to a 4th grader or a 3rd grader, and you're uncomfortable doing that, they pick up on it. They don't know what's going on, but they know that you're not comfortable doing that and something's wrong. And they may translate that into avoiding science because something's going on here that I don't understand. Children are very intuitive in terms of picking up levels of comfort from adults. Another study, the K through 5 school years are critical. But a lack of STEM subject matter experiences coupled with high anxiety and low self-efficacy can lead to low teacher effectiveness. So we know that pre-service elementary teachers are uncomfortable teaching science. They feel like they don't know enough science. They don't know how to teach the science. And this is going to come across when they get into the classroom. So one more. Well, no, not one more. I'll leave it there. And typically at the end of a talk, people ask for questions. I'm leaving my talk asking you a question. First, how can sustainability serve as a unifying theme for integrating STEM disciplines with the social sciences, the arts, the humanities, in the context of civic engagement for our students? And then secondly, do we as university faculty have any interest in helping K through 5 teachers to become more comfortable teaching STEM and thus attract more 6th graders into science, or at least if they don't choose science as a career path, they do have a hunger to know more about science and then become a more informed citizen. And if we have that responsibility, and I'm not sure we do, then how do we do that? And so that's pretty much what I have to say, and I'd like to hear from you guys. Yes, sir.
I'd like to just comment about the second one, and that is that I do not think we are investing enough in the early years with teachers. And I think they're generally uncomfortable. I've been a school superintendent, visited hundreds and hundreds of classrooms. I think there's a general uncomfortableness on the part of many teachers teaching mathematics and science. They're good-hearted, well-intended, and skilled teachers, but they need time to hone their skills to help students. And policymakers at this stage are not willing to invest in that. So right now, the Utah legislature is going to give teachers more time to prepare, but they're going to deduct it from the number of days that students are in school. It's a clever little accounting mechanism. So
Which shell is the P on?
we got to really bite the bullet on this. I'm sorry, I've got a commitment at 12, and I want to ask you this question because I think it's something that troubles me, and that is whether those of you who teach science see it as a kind of screening mechanism as opposed to an enabling mechanism. I've been in physics, freshman physics classes with 400 students, and biology classes with 250 students. And students do get screened out. I mean, they run up against physics problems and biology problems and organic chemistry problems, and they don't know how to get them fixed. So rather than getting help to say, let me show you how to get over this little hump, we say, you know what, check out the social sciences. And so they major in psychology or something else. And the science community, this is going to be unfair, so I'm going to provoke you a little bit. The science community says, see how tough we are? See what we've just done? We've picked the winners and the losers, and the winners are going to go to medical school, and they're going to be astrophysicists, and they're going to fix all of our problems because we've screened out the weak ones, and we've kept the really good ones. But there are some of those folks that are screened out that are terrific young people that don't get the help that they need. How do you fix that?
Well,
if it's true, is it true?
Yes, I think it is true in many cases. I've taught at a medical school. I've taught in a biology department that had mostly pre-med majors in it.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. You know, the first few biology courses, weeded them out.
You're in or out.
Right. At this point in my career, what I'm interested in is informed citizens. And so what I've done is developed one breadth social science course and one breadth biology science course, life science course for non-majors. And there are one person in here who's in one of those classes. Maybe you want to talk to her instead of talking to me. I don't see those classes as being classes where I'm trying to screen anybody out of anything. What I'm hoping is that the people will leave those classes being better informed citizens about some of the issues that they will have to deal with and their children will have to deal with and their parents will have to deal with as they age. In turn, both of these courses are tied around environmental science, by the way, and issues related to sustainability. So I think there are two things. One is, if someone is going to become an engineer, she has to learn calculus.
Right.
You know, and just by the nature of calculus, it will screen some people out who just can't get the concepts. If someone's going to be a physician, he has to learn certain things. I mean, I don't want a brain surgeon who doesn't know neuroanatomy. You know, you're just going to have to do it. But I'll tell you this, when we were teaching at the medical school, the faculty would get together and say, who among the students would I want as my physician? And it wasn't the A and A+ students. Those were the people we wanted to see going into medical research. They're going to make the breakthroughs that cure cancer and those kind of things. It was the B and C+ students who knew that they didn't know everything and would consult references when they were diagnosing someone instead of doing everything because they were God and knew all the answers. And so I think what we're seeing in medical schools is a change of attitude. Lewis Thomas, who was chairman of the Sloan Kettering Cancer Institute, wrote some beautiful books called Life of a Cell and things like that. He had a regular column in the New England Journal of Medicine. And he said, don't send us pre-med students to medical school. Send us history majors and art majors and music majors and English majors. We'll teach them the medicine in medical school. You're trying to teach them all the science before they come to us. Don't do that. Teach them how to think, how to talk to people, how to interact with people, to appreciate what it is to be human in a context, in a social context. We'll teach them the medicine. And so I do think that we do things wrong because it's easy. It's very easy for me to design a test. I can design a test so that half the students fail, 3/4 of the students fail, 90% of the students fail, or everybody fails. I know how to do that. That's not my goal. My goal is, can I design a test that's a learning instrument? And is it building upon the other learning things that I've asked people to do? So, I do think you're right. I think in a lot of cases, we do the screening thing because it's easy and it's efficient and we can run 600 people through a chemistry course and get rid of 400 of them.
Right.
I'm not sure that those 400 people leave that science class with a very good feeling about how science influences their lives and what they need to know about chemistry in order to be successful citizens with healthy children. Yeah.
I'll just add one thing. I just think a lot of people, you can say it at the elementary level, middle school, all the way through higher education. It's not because they're not smart. It's not because they're not motivated. They just sometimes bump into something conceptually that they don't quite get, and they're embarrassed about trying to find the answer to it, and they don't. A little bit of individual help won't solve every problem, but individual attention to students makes a lot of difference in science and in math.
It does.
I just left a liberal arts and sciences university, and a young woman taught organic chemistry. PhD from the University of Washington, postdoc, Washington State, whole thing. I said, why are you at this little liberal arts and sciences? And she said, because I love kids and I love teaching my subject, and it's a great ecosystem. But after her big sections, she spends an hour with 4 or 5 students helping them through this rough spot. And her ability to keep them as active, interested in science is remarkable.
One thing that I do is, even though my classes are not 300, they're more like 90, I start the semester off with individual meetings with each of the students to try to get to know who are you, why are you here, what are your interests. And one of the things that does is it does establish a little bit of rapport, such that I get lots of emails from students, because they've met me, they've talked to me, they know that I'm interested in them, and they're not afraid to contact me and say, I've got something going on over here and I'm going to miss class Friday,
Yeah.
And we talk about it. And so it's hard with 300 or 400 or 600 students, but you can do it with 90.
Yeah.
I don't establish a close relationship with everybody, I won't say that. But I do think that most of the students in the class at least think I'm approachable, I hope. Like I said, ask the student. I didn't even know she was going to be here, so there's
Just checking on you.
Yeah, there's a good opportunity for you to.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I've got to go, but thank you very much for your response.
You had a question.
Oh, well, my comment was on what you were talking about, innovating how you actually teach. I think because you have a variety of people and different learning styles, that is one of the weeding things. Oh, this is how I was taught, this is how, this straight lecture filling their mind thing doesn't work for, hundreds of students if you have a huge class.
Well, Tara may remember one of the quotations that I show my students early in the semester is that in universities, we teach students as though every one of them were going to become a college professor. And they're not. In my class of 90, I think maybe 2 people usually raise their hand and say they might be interested in being a college professor. But that's how we teach. It's how we were taught. We're college professors. We made it through. And so we teach people as though they're going to be college professors. Well, they're not going to be college professors. No.
I'm actively involved in a lot of things where we're trying to do this with integrating sustainability and across the curriculum, and particularly in the sciences. And get a lot of pushback from faculty and departments that it would come at the expense of depth. So this breadth versus depth. How would you combat that discussion?
I would say that in the medical school where I taught, I said that, we could give a test. We could tell the medical students, it's Friday. Go out to the parking lot. On Monday, what I'm going to do is provide you with a list of license plate numbers. And your job will be to tell me the make, model, and color of each card that matches that license plate number. And those medical students could do that. What they couldn't do was take information in from a variety of places, tests, x-rays, the patient's family, and make a diagnosis. And so the process of understanding how our disciplines work is so much more important than memorizing all the content. And so time after time after time, the educational literature is telling us, sacrifice content for process. And again, sustainability is all about process, for me. Tell them to read the research literature in the education of their professional societies. And I think what they'll find is we have to start sacrificing. I got to cover everything in the textbook for what's going on. The other thing is, you can do what I do. Assign them the reading in the textbook. Provide them with no pressure quizzes where they can practice it. Provide them with tests where they're tested on it. But you know what? I'm not going to use class time to lecture on exactly what's in the textbook. I mean, the easiest thing to do is to take a textbook, look at the outline of the textbook, outline your lecture with the textbook, put all the words in that are in bold in your lecture, and lecture the textbook. My niece is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Oberlin College and got her graduate degree at Stanford. She told me, I used to go to class, and the first thing I would do is see if the professor was lecturing the textbook. And if she was, then I would never do any of the reading in the class. Why should she? The person's giving it to you. And if all I do is give somebody what they could have read on their own, what good am I? I could be replaced by a book. I hope I can't be replaced by a book, or a computer for that matter. But that's the other answer, is that you don't have to deliver all the content. The content is there. It's on the internet, it's on Merlot, it's in iTunes U, it's on YouTube, it's in the textbook, it's in papers you want to assign, it's in movies that they can watch. And it frees you up to do more about how is this affecting me. And quite frankly, I don't do enough of that. I think I've lectured way too much in Tara's course. Much more than I should have. Because to me, the most productive things they do is when they're working in groups. And I see it and I hear it, you know, and the feedback that I get when their group writes things tells me that they're getting it. So, but that's my answer. You don't have to deliver all the content. Yes?
With regard to the first question, I think it's not a coincidence that a lot of universities where they're leading in sustainability is in facilities management.
Absolutely.
It's so much harder to do on the curriculum side. You've got silos within colleges and departments. You've got, turf issues, who gets credit for SEHs, who's going to claim the majors. And I wonder, aside from those challenges, which are really organizational, there are certainly intellectual challenges with, again, you talk about process, how do you bring these things together so that you can create some kind of a curriculum that spans colleges or departments? And I suppose one way to look at it would be in terms of career preparation, but I'm also leery of that because, there's a climate there that says we're not going to approve new programs at any university unless it's, going to produce majors who can get jobs. And so when you pitch that, well, what does that mean? What are the students going to go off and do in career terms? Civic engagement is, again, a larger issue and a harder sell politically these days. So how would you address those kinds of challenges organizationally in putting something like this together?
Well, the first answer is not very successfully. I was chairman of the Sustainability Council. I was dean of the College of Natural Resources. And I've finally found my approach is to develop a course and get it approved for general education credit and do it. I could not get there. But the arguments that you can make are, go back to that slide, what are employees saying they want? What employees are saying they want are the very skills that we teach when we deal with sustainability issues, tying economics, environment, and social equity together in ways that require people to think critically, solve problems, be aware of how that is affecting them, and of how the solutions they suggest will affect other people. You know, it's easy to say, build a landfill in your backyard. Or put all the poor people next to the recycling plant. The employers want people who think deeper. They want people who can approach new problems and figure out an answer, not from some textbook answer, not from something that's been done in the past, because the problems they're facing, they haven't dealt with in the past. So I think the arguments are there to be made. Quite frankly, I think it's easier to make those arguments with younger faculty than it is with some of my colleagues at my age. Plenty of us are still teaching from the same old yellow notes that we taught from in 1973. We'll update them for factual content, but we don't change what we're doing. When I was dean and I knew we were going to be dealing with online teaching, I developed and taught 2 online courses myself because I wanted to see what are the faculty up against, does it work, can you communicate with students, can you establish relationships? And so now when faculty come to me and say, I can't establish personal relationships with my students online, sure you can. I've got a graduate course going on right now. One quick more and then we're done. Okay. Well, thank you all. I appreciate your coming. And like I said, I'm sorry that I had to miss the wind uprising film. And I'm sorry I had to miss the air quality talk, but I really appreciate your attending and good luck in what you do with sustainability.